Your family is hell, but I love you. Written and read by Bad Writer. Chapter 3. Sunday Dinner. It had been 3 days staying at the manor without any further mishap. 3 whole days of not being Superboy. And honestly, John was surprised how well he was adjusting. He'd been Superboy for as long as he could remember, and the idea of finally taking a break from all that responsibility was, to say the least, refreshing. And sharing a house with Bruce was certainly not as difficult as he'd once believed. He was almost never home, either working on a case as Batman or at Wayne Enterprises being Bruce Wayne. It was nice to have so much time with Damian, no longer separated by schedules or city skylines. He could sit in the small nook beside the kitchen window and sip his coffee as Damian curled beside him, swimming in John's old Met You hoodie. Or in the sunroom, watching him paint, delicate brushstrokes on canvas. Or them hunched over a coffee table, a small notebook between them, outlining possible wedding venues. It was wonderful. He hadn't felt quite this at peace in such a long time. It was Sunday night when it all flipped on its head. Sunday, every fortnight, was family night, Cape Free and all. He'd attended once before, 3 years ago, a game of Uno which he'd lost triumphantly, and a turkey dinner that had left Damian traumatized and running out of the room to check on Jerry. A shouting match between Jason and Bruce that had been so exuberant John was surprised no blood was shed. After-dinner drinks that had left a tipsy Dick trying to hang from the chandelier with his feet. He'd succeeded, mind you, though the chandelier had come crashing down to the floor only after a few moments. So, to say he was weary about Sunday night was an understatement. He was relieved when Dick arrived, Corey at his side, thankful not to be the only alien in the manor at last. There were drinks passed around, friendly chatter, Selina pulling Corey aside to whisper something in her ear. Bruce comfortable on the armchair as Dick squeezed Damian into a hug. Nothing beyond the usual. Dick leant over and ruffled Damian's hair without injury. John chuckled, smoothing the gelled hair back down, running his fingers through it carefully as to make sure it returned to its original pristine condition. Damian eyed him, his scowl turning up at the corners just slightly. John couldn't help but lean down and press a chaste kiss to it. There was a sudden silence in the room, eerie silence. John turned back to the group, noticing a strange shared glance between Dick and Bruce. It was odd. It wasn't like they'd never seen him or Damian kiss before. They'd been together for years. Once, when they'd first gotten together, Dick had walked in on Damian with his hands down John's pants. He'd laughed it off then, told Damian to be safe and shut the door as he left. He was not laughing now. "So," Dick started, that strange expression planted on his face, "how has engaged life been treating you?" "Great, it's pretty relaxing, honestly," he said, trying to bring some life back into the conversation. "A lot more time on my hands than I'm used to." Dick nodded along, eyes flickering back to Bruce every so often. "And how much have you two discussed for the long term? Wedding planning, I mean." "We have discussed the possibility of an autumn wedding," Damian interrupted coolly, as if he didn't notice the tension at all. Dick choked on his drink, spluttering all over himself. But it's already August! You do mean fall next year, right?" Damian rolled his eyes. "I do not see the point in a prolonged engagement. Jonathan asked me to marry him, and that's what I intend to do. Promptly." The ensuing events were less an argument, more a strangled barrage of questions on marriage and timing and how they planned to have a wedding within the space of only a few months. Yet for every question, Damian seemed to have an answer. Suits? Damian had spoken with a potential designer yesterday. Venues? He and Jonathan had selected several potential locations that would easily become available given the right monetary reward. Press? Public statements? A way to not tank Wayne Enterprises stock with one poor taste article? I've handled him with the press for 5 years. I can manage a few more months of it. It seemed like Damien had been thinking about the logistics of their wedding for quite some time, and the thought of that made John's heart swell even despite Dick's rather erratic behaviour. The conversation tapered off as others began to arrive. Cassandra first, already pre-gamed and ready for the drama. Tim came a little later, quieter than usual, offering John the most awkward hello on the planet. Not that John blamed him. Sure, he was the arsehole who'd broken his big brother's heart, but hell, it was complicated. Though, Tim's mood significantly boosted when Damien accidentally tripped over one of Titus's squeaky toys, falling dramatically forward, almost breaking his nose on the dining table if John hadn't caught him in time. Tim had been less pleased by that. And Jason last, mid-first course, swaggering in an old stained hoodie. "So, I'm just gonna say it," said Jason, cutting a slice out of his steak. "I bet out of all your kids, you didn't think I'd be the only one not to break your anti-alien policy." "I don't have an anti-alien policy." Tim raised a brow but said nothing. "Who I allow to patrol in my city and who I allow to associate with my family are two completely different issues." Jason chuckled and took a bite, speaking with his mouth full. "I can't believe Demon Brat's getting married. If that makes me feel old, it must make you feel ancient, Bruce." Then Jason paused, turning to Damien. "By the way, aren't you like 12? I feel like there are laws against that." "I'm 19, Damien grumbled, taking a bite of his "you won't believe it's not steak," which John was relatively sure was just soybeans and eggplant mushed together that probably tasted like armpit. How the hell Damien ate that stuff was beyond him. "Nah, you're not. If you were 19, you'd be taller." Thankfully, John clasped Damien's hand before it reached for the steak knife. "Anyway, my point is, since when were kids allowed to get married? Feels wrong. You should be spending these days getting resurrected into insanity and finding your chi through murder. That's how it was done back in my day." "Been there, done that." Ugh. Top 10 ways to ruin John Kent's day. Number 1, remind him of his boyfriend's, fiance's, traumatic childhood. He was straight up not having a good time, but at least it couldn't get any worse. Ugh, no worries. If it all fails, at least you've always got the prenup to fall back on. "We're not getting a prenup," said John, shocking himself with his own words. "You're not?" asked Bruce, setting down his cutlery. "No." The question confused him. He knew for a fact that he had more actual money than Damien. Damien, technically speaking, had $4 to his name. He just had free reign of his father's platinum card and 1/5 of the Wayne estate locked up in some trust he couldn't even use. "Unfair," said Selena, slumping into her chair and giving Bruce a side-eye. "I mean, I don't think it's a big deal anyway. Damien doesn't even have access to his trust fund yet." He nudged Damien to back him up. Damien just shook his head, a non-vocal, "Don't bother." "But he will when he turns 21. "Well, I think that's an issue for then. I think what B is trying to say is that we want to make sure you guys are making sensible decisions for your future." "I do not blame them, judging from your heritage of colonization and theft," Corey added. Yeah, maybe John had been wrong about wanting another alien at the party. He didn't know much about his Kryptonian heritage, only the stuff he'd pieced together from his father. But he knew enough that he knew Krypton hadn't been particularly kind to other civilizations, particularly the Tamaranians. "I mean, I don't think it's genetic," John tried, but it wasn't like he was going to quell the effects of centuries of interplanetary colonialism in one night. "I mean, John, you were talking about free time. Is that how you're going to spend the rest of your life, lounging around in the manor?" Dick added. "I do have a degree in journalism, you know. I didn't go into crippling student debt for nothing. So that's what you're going to do. Journalism? How much does that pay? I didn't think you guys were the kind of family that worried about money this much. I mean, judging by all the... He gestured around the elegant dining hall. I think what Dick is trying to say is we're just curious what you're planning for the future. No one is saying you need to work if you don't want to. We can all agree there's no need for it. Selena finally intervened. This is a confusing conversation. Then let's talk about the wedding, cheered Jason, clearly having had too much to drink already. Who's going to be your best man? He asked, a little too eagerly, as if Damien was actually going to pick him. Damien shrugged, muttering a haven't decided, which John knew was absolute BS. Everybody on the planet knew who he was going to pick. I don't know, probably Jay, I guess, said John. Jay? Damien said, head turning on a swivel to John. Fuck. Yeah, he probably should have been more careful bringing that one up. Wait, you're going to ask your ex-boyfriend to be your best man? I mean, he's my closest guy friend after Damien, and we dated years ago. Who else would I ask? You could ask Yara, Damien muttered into his food. Come on, he literally helped me pick out your ring. It's only fair I ask him. Damien scowled at the silver band on his finger, as if it was jade personified. Jason whooped. Trouble in paradise? I think I need some fresh air, said John, rising from his seat. It was all getting a little much. He needed to clear his head away from all the drama. He wandered outside, past the side gates and into Alfred's garden, letting the cool air and sounds of the faraway city surround him. He took a deep breath and sat down on the small bench. He knew they were just curious, just concerned, though all the Waynes had always been a little too much to handle in one go. For a moment he thought about flying up to go look down at the garden, but he decided against it. He knew Bruce had all kinds of traps and security measures around the manor, and he wasn't sure how many of them would work on Kryptonians, so he sat and breathed. It was only a little moment later that Damien's careful, almost inhumanly quiet footsteps pattered through the garden. Sometimes, even with all his super senses, Damien had the ability to sneak up on him. Not tonight, though. He was too tuned in tonight. Are you all right, beloved? He said, standing directly behind John, leaning forward to snake his arms around his neck, chin on his shoulder. They're all a little much. They're just protective. I know. John sighed into Damien's touch. Will you actually be mad if I asked Jay to be my best man? Damien hesitated. Before, a little, I think he covets too much of you, and that is difficult for me sometimes, given your history. And then, after a pause, sometimes I feel as though he's still in love with you. Do you not want me to ask him? Beloved, you can't give me that much power. You know I'm far too selfish when it comes to you. He pressed a kiss to John's neck, right below his ear. Nakamura is one of your closest friends. He means a great deal to you, and as your future husband, it is my job to give you all the things you want in this world. If you want him to be your best man, then you may have it. I don't know how you can say you're selfish and then say something like that, Damie. That is because you do not know what I think of when I see him make you smile. John chuckled and pressed his nose into the side of Damien's face. You know Jay isn't actually in love with me anymore, right? He asked. They'd had this conversation before, but he still knew Damien needed to hear it. Sometimes he thought it would be better if he heard it from Jay himself. But he knew he couldn't trust those two to have a civil conversation. It was strange, because in a way, without Jay, John and Damien may have never gotten together. John may have never realized he was bisexual, or at least realized it too late, never figured out that his childhood hero worship of Damien had been something a little more than purely platonic feelings. I know, said Damien. It is just difficult for me to picture a world where someone has loved you, known you. touched you, and then fallen out of love with you? It doesn't seem possible. Promise you won't. Jonathan. I promise until my dying day, and even past that, until the world caves in on itself and the universe is nothing but a memory. When you and I are nothing but ashes, even then, I promise you, my soul is yours. God, you're such a dweeb. I still cannot believe I'm wearing jewellery that Nakamura had a hand in selecting. Honestly, John, that man cannot decide what hair colour to have every other week, and you really gave him the power to decide on something I have to wear for the rest of my life. Well, it was between him or some country bumpkin who wears ripped jeans and flannels every other day. Well, I happen to know that that country bumpkin has rather impeccable taste when it comes to certain things, at least, he said, tilting his head to kiss him. Just the implication of something, soft and slow and beautiful as Damien always was. John sighed into the kiss, his whole body calming with it. He jerked back, surprised his senses hadn't picked up on anything, though Damien often had that effect on him. Tim was standing awkwardly at the edge of the garden, waiting for them to break apart. Drake, Damien sneered, going full demon brat. We're all heading off now. Bruce wanted me to tell you. Good riddance. You lot have been enough of a headache tonight. John stood, breaking away from Damien's hold. We should probably say goodbye. And I thought you had something you wanted to ask Dick. He directed at Damien, who scowled back. Come on, he said, extending a hand to help him stand. Damien took it and stood, walking past Tim. Tim just stared and said nothing. No snarky remark. Nothing. The look on his face when he turned back to John was a little heartbreaking to see. He opened his mouth. John paused, waiting. Nothing came. You should probably head back. Yeah, John said, but didn't move, waiting for Tim. Tim sighed, not meeting John's eyes. How is he? He said in a small voice. He's okay. He's still fucking heartbroken, you piece of shit. He wanted to snap. He didn't. Is he seeing anyone? Tim, you know I'm not going to answer that. Tim sighed again. Yeah, I know. I wanted to, I don't know, make sure he's okay, I guess. Then you should probably ask him that. He doesn't want to talk to me. John looked at Tim once more, shaking his head softly, and walked back to the main house.